Trump proposed the use of disinfectants to protect against corona. He's now looking for volunteers in the world's first truly double-blind experiment. Governor Cuomo said to reopen, New York needs to have robust contact tracing. Mayor de Blasio pointed out that New York has plenty of experience with contact tracing. There's even talk of remaking some classic movies. Mutiny on the Bounty could film the fight over the last roll of paper towels. Guess who's coming to dinner? No one. When Harry Met Sally would become When Harry Missed Sally by That Much.
The whole idea is that if you're familiar with like Saturday Night Live's Weekend Update or any of the late night TV shows who throw up pictures onto their screen over their shoulder, this is the kind of thing that we can now do using Zoom backgrounds. And that's what I'm going to teach you how to do. We'll talk about what the system requirements and some other stuff is going to be in a few minutes. But there are going to be two parts to what I'm going to do. In the first part, which will take 30 to 40 minutes, it's going to be more instructional. In the second part, you'll actually, I'll show you me doing the things that we're talking about. The whole idea is going to be, if you want to be able to show slides at the same time as remaining in the picture, this is the technique you can use. If any of you are familiar with the screen share in Zoom, you can do a screen share to share a slide presentation, but if you did that, then you would disappear from the screen or you'd become a small box in the corner. I'm not disappearing from the screen. I'm part of the presentation, and you can see that all I'm doing is changing my backgrounds. These are just Zoom backgrounds that I'm changing one by one to give the presentation without me disappearing from it. If some of you know what the open broadcasting system is or eCam, these are much more sophisticated systems that allow you to do much more. You don't need any of that. A lot of people know that they could do this, but only with extra software and hardware. And what I'm showing you is you don't need to have that. However, you do need to have a computer. I don't think you'll be able to do this on a Chromebook. I don't have a tablet. I haven't tried it out, but from everything I hear about them, it would not be easy to do lots of slides. Maybe you could do a few, but you're not gonna be able to do lots and lots. So if you're gonna plan to do this for shows, then you're gonna probably need a laptop or a desktop to do it. I'm going to be using my iMac, using a certain level of the operating system, and I'll be showing you stuff using PowerPoint. PowerPoint is a slide presentation system, but what I'm going to show you is not only useful for comedy. If any of you are teachers or salespeople or doctors doing telemedicine, you might want to be able to present information but not disappear from the image, and this would be a technique that you could use to do that as well. So here's the joke, one of the jokes that you've seen. The setup for the joke, obviously the text wouldn't be on the screen. The setup for the joke is Governor Cuomo said to open up, New York needs to have robust contact tracing. Mayor de Blasio pointed out that New York has plenty of experience with contact tracing. And there's the visual punchline. When I say the word contact tracing, I bring up the picture of contact tracing. But I don't want to bring it up as a Zoom background, because if I bring it up as a Zoom background, then I'll be blocking the image, and I might want to have lots of other things going on at the same time. So the idea is that I want to bring it up where I've left space for myself to exist in the slide, and where I've framed the picture nicely, and where I have some background that's sort of a theme to my set, and I'll be showing you all of those pieces. And the question is, how do we develop them? This picture I'm showing you is me delivering the joke that would be on screen with me in the picture. And the question is, how do we achieve that? So I'm going to cover three things in this presentation. I'm going to tell you a little bit more about virtual backgrounds, even if you've just use some of the existing ones. There's much more about it. And then I'll talk a little bit about creating slides in a system like PowerPoint and saving them so that you can then bring them into Zoom as Zoom backgrounds, and the problems in Zoom backgrounds for which I've developed workarounds so that you can navigate those slides and then make edits to your slides and redo them as needed. Okay, I'm making a little bit of an assumption that you know some sort of slide preparation software like PowerPoint. It could be Google Slides or Keynote. If you don't, you're just going to have to believe that such things exist. And at the very end, I'll tell you about the things that you should learn to master in PowerPoint so that you'll be able to do this type of work. I assume that you know that there are places like Google Images where you can get pictures off of the internet, and we'll be seeing some examples of that. And then there might be some photo editing software. Some of you may know how to use Photoshop or Adobe Illustrator. You don't need any of that. PowerPoint and Google Slides and Keynote have some rudimentary picture editing tools in them. Everything I've needed to use, I've had in PowerPoint. I don't use the other ones particularly, but certainly PowerPoint is powerful enough for all of the photo editing that I've been doing. If any of you have never used Zoom backgrounds, then you need to first go to the web portal. That's your account in Zoom on the internet. And you need to go to the settings under meeting. And in the settings under meeting, there's something called advanced in meeting settings and something called virtual background. And you need to turn this on. If you don't turn it on, you're not gonna be able to use virtual backgrounds. If you've turned it on the web portal, then you can go into the Zoom app and you can open up the preferences. This is one way to get to the Zoom backgrounds. And when you open up the preferences in the Zoom app, one of the selections is virtual background. And at the start, the first time you might have started, it'll have no virtual background. And so you'll see a picture of me in there with the background being my real background, whatever is in my room, in my living room. In order to select one, you just click on one, and then that will be the virtual background you see. Now, a lot of people get confused by the next idea, which is mirror my video. When you look in a mirror and you put up your right hand, it looks like your left hand in the mirror, right? That's what mirroring a video is. It's as if you're looking at yourself in the mirror. When you mirror your video, it has absolutely no impact on the way the rest of the world sees you. The rest of the world does not see you mirrored. Only you see you mirrored, because that's how people like to look at themselves, as if they're looking in the mirror. I have seen plenty of comedians who created a mirror image of text and then showed it to the world, thinking that because it was mirrored for them, it was mirrored for the rest of the world. And it is not mirrored for the rest of the world. So mirroring the video only flips things horizontally for you. And how does it do that? Well, if you select it, mirror my video one way, it will have the Golden Gate Bridge going in one direction, and the other way, it'll have it going in the other direction. But it's only for how you see yourself. The whole rest of the world will see the Golden Gate just going in the one direction that the picture is. If you want, there are a bunch of free websites or websites which offer free pictures. They're on Zoom's. This is just what Zoom makes recommendations of, where you can download all sorts of backgrounds. And I've seen people do that and, sometimes make fun of the background or just trying to have a cheerful background around. When you want to add your own Zoom background, you click on this little plus sign, and that will take you to a panel where you can either add images or video. Today, we're going to focus on images. And once you click on add image, it'll take you to your desktop file system. I'm showing it to you on a Mac. And on a Mac, you can select multiple images at the same time. Oh. On the PC, I'm not sure that you can. I've seen people having problems that they can only select one at a time. The technique I'm showing still works, but you won't be able to select them all at once. You'll have to select them one at a time. So here I've selected 3 backgrounds that I had as files on my file system. I hit return, and now these are new virtual backgrounds in Zoom. One's the bookcase, one's the Johnny Carson curtains, one's a red curtain. And now I can select those as my virtual background. So this one is the red curtain now, and that's what I would look like against the red curtain. If you select Johnny Carson, then that would become your new background. And that's what I would look like. Now, a second way to get to the virtual backgrounds when you're in Zoom is at the bottom of the window that you're looking at. There's a whole bunch of things that you can select while you're in the middle of your Zoom meeting. And if you select on the little up arrow, the little caret that's next to the stop video icon, it'll pop up a small window that says select virtual background or choose virtual background. And if you click on that, it opens that same panel we were looking at, which is the settings panel, but putting you already into the virtual background location. Now here's a big thing, which is I have a green screen. I'll show you in a minute what a green screen looks like. But basically a green screen is a way to tell the computer to ignore everything that is the color of the green screen. So here, for example, you could buy from Amazon for $50 or $70, depending if it has a stand, a green screen, which is not really a green screen. These are green and blue screens. They're double-sided. And in a minute, I'll explain why you might want that. But you have a green screen, and if you sit in front of the green screen, the computer will say, everything that's green, I will ignore and replace with the virtual background. But you could also sit in front of the blue. As long as you don't wear any green if you're sitting in front of green, because a green screen, because then the computer will make parts of you disappear. Or if you're wearing a blue shirt against a blue screen, the part of the blue shirt would disappear. In order to tell the computer what color background you have, when you say you have a green screen, there's this little oval that you can select. It says manually pick the color of the background if the detected color is not accurate. It'll try to guess what the background is, but if it doesn't do a good job, then you can just click on it and you'll see then you can choose the color of the background. What if you don't have a green screen? Then there's a few possibilities. You might have a computer that's powerful enough to try to do virtual backgrounds without a green screen. The computer I'm on at this moment I'm not using a green screen behind me right now. I'll actually turn this off for a second, and you'll see I have a big green screen. You see it over there in the background? I don't have it set up right behind me right now. I only use it on my laptop. But on my desktop, I don't need it because my desktop is powerful enough. It will figure out what's me and what's the background. But notice how as I wave my hand, you see the black splotches? That's the computer catching up, figuring out what's me and what isn't me, even without a green screen. If I had a green screen, it would catch up a lot faster because it doesn't have to figure it out. It just drops out everything that's green, including me if I'm turning green. So you don't want to move around very quickly if you don't have a green screen. But let's say you click, I don't have a green screen. You may very well get this message that your computer does not meet requirements. That's why I own a green screen, because when I'm doing a show on the laptop is not powerful enough and I need to have a green screen. But for my desktop, I don't need to. If you have problems with that, then you only have 2 choices. One is buy a green screen or make your own, which means hang a curtain. It doesn't have to be green. It can be whatever color you're not. It could be a curtain. It could be a sheet, whatever you want. It could be cardboard, or it could be a blank wall. And depending on how uniform it is, will be better or worse as a green screen. Or you can buy a stronger computer. The website tells you what the system's requirements are in order to do green screen on a particular type of computer. It's a lot cheaper to buy a green screen than it is to buy a new computer. Okay, so now we're getting to the stuff of how do we create these visual punchlines. So again, I'm going to show you everything in PowerPoint. I'll show you how I add pictures to a slide using blank slides for setups and saving a set of slides. So here's a picture of PowerPoint. If you don't know PowerPoint, you'll just have to trust that this is PowerPoint. I've got two slides here. One's a plain blue background. One has Johnny Carson curtain background. Okay. And I have in mind this visual image of the tracing of body outlines, which is going to be a punchline for my joke on contact tracing. I've visualized it in my mind. So I've gone to Google Images and I've searched around there and I found a picture that kind of is what I'm thinking about. So I can just copy it and paste it into the PowerPoint, or I could save it and import it. There are different ways to get it into PowerPoint, but in this case, just a copy and paste works.
Do you prefer copy paste?
Not prefer copy paste, because what I tend to do is I go to Google and I select 4 or 5 images that kind of are what I like, save them to my artwork folder, because once I get into PowerPoint, I might play with 2 or 3 different images and see which one really works. I'm showing you the one that I've selected, but I've got 3 or 4 more versions of body outlines that I've saved, and I don't want to keep going back to Google Images and searching for it. So what I do is I spend a couple minutes, find a few, save them, give them all the same name, body outline 1, body outline 2, body out. Then I go into PowerPoint, I make 5 slides, bring them all in, see which one works, throw out the ones I don't want, that kind of thing. One of the key things to do is you don't want to put pictures like right up to the edges. Zoom sometimes crops the edges of the image and you have no idea what people will be watching your show on. So you don't want to be in the corners because then they might miss part of it. It's also aesthetically not too pleasing. So you want to back it off of a corner, but I'm doing a bunch of things. This isn't what I want it to look like. I want it to be rotated. I want to crop it. I want to brighten it. I want to put a border on it. I'm going to show you doing all those things at the end of the tutorial part, so you'll see how quickly one could do it. So even if you're not familiar with doing it in PowerPoint yet, you'll see it doesn't take that much to learn how to do it. I'm also making sure to leave space for myself because I'm going to appear in the image. So I don't want to cover up the drop-in picture, the over-the-shoulder picture. I want to make sure it stays over the shoulder. So I have to plan, where am I going to be in the set? Now, I don't have to stay in the same place. I can move around. I just have to plan accordingly. Then, when I bring it into Zoom, here I am in the space that I allowed for me to be with the picture over my shoulder off to the side. Here's another way that I could do things. I'm not creating images from scratch. These are pieces that I want in a picture. And I got them from Google Images, searching for faces, searching for spray, searching for disinfectants that you could buy. And I assembled them all in PowerPoint and put them together into this picture. Again, these are basic picture editing things in PowerPoint, not very complicated Photoshop stuff. But I don't have to have this as an over-the-shoulder picture. If I did, then this is how I would set it up. But if I wanted to put me in the picture, I could just have me performing in the middle and have elements show up around me. That's all up to you to decide in the design of your punchline. But then, of course, you have to make sure you're in the right place when you deliver it. Here's a third example, a slightly more complicated one, where I have to break this picture into pieces, add some elements, reassemble it. So I'm adding some text, adding an arrow, clipping or cropping parts of the picture, reassembling it from when Harry met Sally to when Harry missed Sally by that much. I know what I want the picture to be, and all I did was I found the right poster that I could then adapt it to make it work.
And you did all of that in PowerPoint? You did
all of it in PowerPoint. You do not need Photoshop Illustrator. If you know Photoshop Illustrator or anything else, sure, great. Go right ahead. I'm just trying to show you, you don't need
you could do it, yeah.
Okay. Now, it's key to use blank slides so that you're not distracting people when you set up a joke before you deliver the punchline. If any of you remember the old light trays for 35mm slides where you'd lay out all your slides so you can arrange them in the order you want before you pop them into the slide tray. Well, this is a light table in PowerPoint where I can arrange all my jokes in whatever order I want, or select which ones I want to do for a certain show. Notice that I've left blank backgrounds as setups, not between every picture, but between whichever picture or pictures I need to set up the next punchline. Now, all I've done here is I've changed the background from the Johnny Carson curtain to a red curtain. You don't want to have to do that for every single picture. You want to do it on what are called background masters. So every single slide in this show, in this PowerPoint slide set, uses the same background master, which is the Johnny Carson one. And I can just change which master I'm using, and now they're all using the red curtain background. Or I just did a show on flappers this weekend, I switched to the flappers background. Or I created my own CNN studio, I switched to the CNN studio. You want to be able to keep rebranding your images for wherever show you're going to do, and you do that by using PowerPoint background masters. Again, beyond the scope of what I'm teaching, but that's a clue to what you would need to do. So the question is, how do we go from all these jokes that are in PowerPoint and get them into Zoom, and then how do we get move around in Zoom and manipulate them in Zoom? And that's what the next piece is. First, we got to get them out of PowerPoint. Now, if you would do a Command S or a Control S, you'd be saving your PowerPoint file. Of course, you want to do that. But this is a separate step where we're going to export all the slides from the PowerPoint show as individual slides. For that, you go to, on the Mac, you go to File, Export. And what that will let you do is choose what format you want to export things in. Not PDF. You want to format it in an image format. You want to export it in an image format like JPEG, because that's what Zoom needs to read in. You could use some of the other image formats, but JPEG is a perfectly good one to use. And it will then give you the option on a Mac of what resolution you want to save in it. The standard aspect ratio for most cameras today is 16:9. For most displays, it's 16:9 ratio. That is the native ratio, aspect ratio in Zoom for most cameras, and the resolution that is the typical one in Zoom is 1920 by 1080. You don't have to use those, but if you don't use one that matches the aspect ratio, Zoom may do some cropping or stretching of your picture, and you don't want to have that happen. You want to be under control. So I recommend that you match whatever the requirement will be for your system, which is typically 16:9 and 1920 by 1080. And you save every slide. The way you do that is you'll navigate to a certain folder location. You'll create a folder. Here I'm just creating one called temp, and they're going to be exported as a subfolder called slides for Zoom. And now what we're looking at is all those files on the desktop. This looks a lot like the light table in PowerPoint. It's the same images, but they're now individual files that PowerPoint has exported, and they're labeled slide 1, slide 2, slide 3, etc. in the exact same order that they were in the PowerPoint, but they're now JPEG files. Now we've got them sitting as files on our desktop. We've got to bring them into Zoom. All right. So what I'm going to show you is how do we get them into Zoom? How do we navigate in Zoom? And how do we do things when we want to edit or rearrange slides, and then talk about some issues of the virtual background that we really want to be aware of so we can be efficient about doing this whole process. So the first step we've already seen. How do you bring slides into Zoom? You go to the virtual background panel, you click on that little plus symbol, it takes you to the file system, you navigate to that folder where you save them all. On a Mac, you could just do Command A to select all the files, and boom, it's selected, in this case, 56 items, and you hit return and they come into Zoom. On a PC, you might have to bring them in one at a time, so you'll only want to do this right before your show. You don't want to be doing this over and over and over. But you'll still be able to do it. And my guess is you'll probably start small with just a few slides, so it won't be so onerous at any rate. And then there are now slides in Zoom. There were 7 slides a minute ago. 7 virtual backgrounds a minute ago. It looks like 8, but one of them is no virtual background. Now I added 56, so there's 63 virtual backgrounds. So now this whole time, in order to show you this tutorial, all I've been doing is clicking the right arrow on my keyboard to advance from virtual background to virtual background. I haven't been clicking on the virtual backgrounds with my trackpad. I've just been hitting the right arrow key. So that's what this says, advance with the right arrow key. So this lets you navigate. Now you use the right arrow key to go forward. You can use the left arrow key to back up a slide. You can also use the up and down arrow keys to jump up a row of 4 backgrounds or down a row of 4 backgrounds. The point is, you don't need somebody doing tech support for you. This whole time, my hand is out of sight of the camera. And when I sit and do a show, I just make sure that my camera cannot see the keyboard, and I just have my hand resting there, and I advance exactly when I want the punchline to show up. One key thing, though, is, and for those of you who brought up the virtual background panel now, it typically blocks your view of things on the screen. You can slide it so that it's almost completely off of your computer screen, but it has to remain open and it has to remain the target of your keyboard so that the arrow keys will be going to the virtual background window so that you can advance from slide to slide. I've got mine slid all the way off to the side. I can barely see it, but that's where my focus of my keyboard is so that I can advance. That's key, otherwise you can't advance. Hopefully in the future, Zoom will make other ways to do that. So here's how you would do your joke. You wouldn't have the text sitting up the screen, but who knows if I'm going to remember the right wording, so here I go. Governor Cuomo said to open up, New York needs to have robust contact tracing. Mayor de Blasio pointed out that New York has plenty of experience with contact tracing. All I did was hit the keyboard right arrow at the exact second that I want contact tracing to show up. Trump proposed the use of disinfectants to protect from corona. He's now looking for volunteers in the world's first truly double-blind experiment. And boom, it comes up. So you've got to have your set practice, and you can't change the order in the middle of your show because those slides aren't going to change their order. All right, so now comes the big question. You could do it once, but what happens when you want to start making changes? To delete slides, that's fairly straightforward. Within Zoom, you could just delete any background by clicking on the little X in the upper right corner. So if you click on it, then it'll back up to the most recent one that it can find, and that'll become your new background. That's okay if you have 20 jokes and you just want to remove 1 or 2 jokes. Mm-hmm. But Zoom does not give you the ability to delete groups of backgrounds. So let's say you want to delete 10 or 20 slides. You cannot do them all by selecting 10 and deleting. Mm-hmm. You have to delete them one at a time. You also cannot rearrange slides. You can't say, I want to move this joke before another joke, and you cannot even add a new background anywhere except the end. So it's not convenient in Zoom to rearrange in anything other than a simple deletion. Furthermore, in general, you're going to be making changes to your slides. You're going to rebranding the background. How do we handle all of these? The workaround for doing this is that you don't try to do too much in Zoom. You do all your changes in PowerPoint. You've got your PowerPoint saved. You want to move a joke around, move it around in PowerPoint. You want to change a joke, change it in PowerPoint. You want to rebrand it in PowerPoint. Then you should re-export the entire slide set, and we're going to see why in a minute. But the key is that you want the whole slide set to have been created at the same time. Mm-hmm. The next step will be to go into Zoom and delete all the old version of your slide set and re-import the new one. But remember I said that in Zoom, you cannot delete except 1 at a time. So if I had a 56 slide set of jokes, in Zoom, to get rid of them one at a time, I'd have to sit there and click 56 times. You can do that, but I'll show you a way to do it a lot faster, which is that all the images in Zoom are stored in a particular folder. They're stored in a subfolder called Virtual Background Custom, which is different from the ones they supply. And under that, it has all these funny names of files. But if you actually click on it, you'll see that it's the right picture. It just created this funny name. What's interesting, though, is that it maintains the original time the slides were created. Back where you created them from PowerPoint using export, and you created slide 1 through 56, they were all created within, let's say, a few seconds or maybe a minute of each other. So they're all going to have the same time. Let's say yesterday at 10:50 or 10:51, or June 21st at 9:11. You figure out which slide set is the one you want to delete. You select all those files on your desktop and delete them. Now, instead of having to delete 56 slides in Zoom one at a time as virtual backgrounds, you actually can delete them all in one go on your file system. However, Zoom may or may not notice that you deleted them. Sometimes it notices on its own and it updates its virtual background list. I've seen that happen recently, so maybe it's a change to Zoom. But worst comes to worst, just quit Zoom and start Zoom again. And when you start Zoom again, it'll say, oh, I can't find those guys anymore, and it drops them out and they're gone. Now that your old set is gone because you deleted the actual files on your desktop, you can import your new version. And whatever changes you made in your new version, rebranding, re-editing, rearranging, is now your new slide set. Once you've done this a few times, it just becomes quick. It's a few keystrokes to do it. You set up a link to where the virtual backgrounds are on the file system. You just find which set you need to delete. You delete those. Don't delete all of them because you might not want to get rid of them. Just delete the ones that share the same time of the slide set that you're trying to get rid of. Then you go into Zoom, navigate to where you've re-exported them from PowerPoint, and bring them in again. Now, there are a few other issues. If any of you have done PowerPoint presentations, you might have used like those clickers that let you advance from slide to slide. Zoom does not recognize that. There can be webcam aspect ratio issues. You want to figure out what your aspect ratio is if you're seeing cropping, and then in your PowerPoint, make sure to save your images to match the aspect ratio. But so far, I've seen that 16:9 seems to be the default that works best. You can do videos, but videos do not stop at the end of playing once. They they loop endlessly. So if you're going to do a video joke, then you should make sure to freeze frame on the end of your video for like 5 seconds so that you'll have enough time to advance to your next slide, so it won't start replaying that video or animation that you put in, unless of course that's part of your joke, which is fine. But if you don't want it, then you have to artificially freeze frame on the end of the video. And Zoom doesn't bring audio in from those videos. You can bring audio in separately in Zoom as a separate channel, but that's a little beyond the scope of what I'm covering today. Now, I've alluded to the fact that you don't need Photoshop or some fancy photo editing system, that you can do a lot of photo editing in PowerPoint. These are sort of the key items that I would suggest learning in PowerPoint. If you're new to PowerPoint, don't get overwhelmed by learning all the standard tutorials that teach you about things that you just don't need. These are the things you would need for doing picture editing. So I have PowerPoint. What I'm showing you right now is my end goal. This is what I would like my PowerPoint slide to look like. And I'm going to show you creating that PowerPoint slide. All right, so I'm starting from a blank white slide. I am switching over to Google Images. I've typed in Johnny Carson curtain background, hit return. I'm just going to do a copy and paste because that's faster, but normally I would save it. First, I'm going to click once to bring it up in this window. I see that the resolution 1280 by 720, that's not 1920 by 1080, but it's the right aspect ratio of 16 by 9. I'm going to use a right click to open up and say, instead of save image, I'm just going to be copying the image. Now I'm switching back to PowerPoint. And in this slide, I'm pasting it. Notice it filled the screen because it filled the slide window because my slide window is the same aspect ratio. All right, so I've got the curtain in. I know what I have in mind for the sidewalk, so I'm gonna go back to Google Images. The words that I ended up figuring out were the right words were body, outline, sidewalk, police. And lo and behold, I see a bunch of them. I might save a bunch of them to play with, but we already know that this is the one I like. Again, I copy image, switch back to PowerPoint, and do a paste. Now, it's the right image, but is it what I want it to look like? No. So one thing I could do is rotate it. All right, that's the way I want it to appear rotated. Now, I don't like all this stuff on the left side, that's down the tunnel. I'm going to use, by double clicking on the image, I'm going to be able to crop it. And I'm just going to crop it, yay, about there. The rest of it is still there, but it's invisible because I cropped it. But it hasn't gotten rid of it if I ever want to go back to it. Now, I want to put it into the right position and maybe make it a little bit bigger. But I also want, it's kind of dim. So I'm going to go to some of the picture editing tools. There's one called brightness. And do you see how that's a lot brighter?
Wow.
Didn't take a lot to achieve that. And I could go over bright, but that would tell me I've gone too far. That's where I think it's going to work well. Now, you'll notice that anytime you see these types of pictures in a TV show, there's always a border around it. So if I double click on that, I can set a border. It's called the line, and I'm going to make a solid line. I like to use black with a 3-point border, but you could use anything you want. You could even use gradient borders. So here's a gradient border, and you'll see that that border is changing color as it goes around, and you could change what colors it is or isn't. Do you see how this is matching that much more closely now? My point was that in a few short keystrokes, I was able to bring in an image, do some minor editing to it, set it up for being the punchline of my joke.